The true story of the Israelites is the true story of the people of color, people with black skin. See them? They were all black, the lineages of the one called Jesus, all the way down to his very self. Black. This is the one called Jesus. Black. This was him, in a debate with the scribes concerning affairs of the scriptures. This was the Virgin Mother Mary and the Blessed Child. There are several versions of these original icons, all black. Now this was Jesus while in his youth. Tell me, just what do you see? They were all black, all the saints. Until the Renaissance. And how did the world come about these icons? Thanks to the Russian secret vault, which was opened only years ago by the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. This laid to rest all the doubts about the identity of blacks, which has brought about so much fuss for a very long time. Regardless, has Hollywood always known that the one called Jesus was black? Has the fervent portrayal of Jesus as white in the movies been unintentional all along? Or has it been just another one of those white supremacist games to continually humiliate the black confidence and subject them to perpetual denial and retardation? We shall be finding out all that in this video. Don't forget to support our steadfastness by hitting the thumb button. Share with as many as you can to keep spreading our eye-opening contents, and consider subscribing to stay tuned in with us if you are yet to. Now let us proceed. For centuries past, Hollywood has often perpetuated a distorted image of Jesus Christ, depicting him as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed Caucasian. However, this portrayal contradicts the historical and biblical evidence suggesting that Jesus was a black African.
The thief cometh not but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. But I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. St. John 10, verse 10. Are there any questions?
Watch it, baby. This cat is heavy on religion.
I can see this has become a struggle between good and evil. Satan has a question.
Yes, sir, Chaplain Gill, but since neither one of us are God, I don't think either one of us are in any position to say who's good and who's evil.
Why don't you just ask your question?
We were discussing the disciples. What color were they?
Well, I don't think we know that for certain.
But they were Hebrews, were they not?
That's right.
As was Jesus. Jesus was also a Hebrew.
Why don't you just ask your question?
What color were the original Hebrews?
I have told you that we don't know that for certain.
Then you can't believe for certain that Jesus was white.
Just a moment. God is white. Isn't it obvious?
Well, that is obvious, but we don't know if it's obvious that God is white. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that Jesus did not have blonde hair and blue eyes. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the images of Jesus that are on prison walls and churches throughout the world are not historically correct, because history teaches us that Jesus was born in a region where the people had color. There's proof in the very Bible that you ask us to read in Revelations 1st chapter, verse 14 and 15, that Jesus had hair like wool and feet the color of brass.
Just what are you saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm proving to you that Jesus was not, and I might quote one of our Indian brothers, he was not a paleface.
Aha.
Amen.
Isn't that interesting?
The portrayal of Jesus as a white man has its roots in ancient times, but gained momentum during the Renaissance period, 14th to 17th centuries, when European artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo solidified Jesus' white image, which was further entrenched through colonialism and imperialism. This whitewashing gained momentum in Hollywood's golden age, which was from the late 1920s to 1960s, when studios consistently cast white actors as Jesus, ignoring historical accuracy. Movies like Ben-Hur and The Greatest Story Ever Told cemented the white Jesus narrative, which continued with movies like The Passion of the Christ and The Da Vinci Code, and TV shows like Jesus of Nazareth and The Bible. Hollywood's whitewashing of Jesus erased his Middle Eastern and African roots, reinforcing Western cultural superiority and perpetuating harmful stereotypes and racism. The whitewashing of Jesus, depicted as a black man in biblical times, stems from complex historical, cultural, and ideological factors. During the Roman Empire, Jesus' Jewish heritage and Middle Eastern features were not distinct from those of Africans. The scripture describes Jesus as having hair like wool and feet like burnished brass. Looking at some of those among his lineage suggests that it is very unlikely for Jesus to have white European features. Hollywood, known to convey messages of hidden truths by the riddle of its movies for as long as we can tell, knew about this far long enough before most. Let's have a look at this old TV show for a minute.
Mama, it's just a symbol of Jesus.
Well, hello, Symbol, and goodbye.
JJ painted him.
Don't finger me, Michael. I had him in the closet where he wasn't performing no miracles for nobody.
Mama, couldn't we at least let Black Jesus hang alongside?
Forget it. The only Jesus I know is him, and the one thing he don't need is a partner. This picture has been in my family for as long as I can remember. When I was a baby, I don't know what I saw first. My mama, my papa, or this Jesus. Now, he's the one I know and love. So let's close the subject. Jesus was black. The Bible would have said so.
But it does say so.
What are you talking about?
I read about it. It's in Revelations chapter 1, verse 14. I read about it in Muhammad Speaks. It says, his hair is like wool, and his eyes are like flame of fire.
Oh, Lord have mercy. It sure do say that, don't it?
And see, Mom, look at her hair, like wool, ain't it? And look at them eyes, red like fire.
Yeah, they sure is. Judy, how come you decided to paint this? I don't know. All of a sudden, I just had divine thoughts on my mind.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. They were supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it.
This TV show titled Good Times, Black Jesus has been around for as far back as the year 1971, and it was all about the true history of Jesus. However, there are several passages of the Holy Scriptures pointing to the blackness of the skins of the characters in the Bible. Rahab the harlot, Tamar, the Queen of Sheba, were all of black ancestry and part of Jesus' genealogy. Abraham, too, was born in the city of a black man, Nimrod, whereas Nimrod was amongst the grandchildren of Noah. In the book of the Songs of Solomon, Solomon says, "I am black, but I am handsome." There are numerous other references speaking on the blackness and African heritage of those in the lineage of Jesus. Let's have a look at it even more. It would certainly surprise you, trust me. It's all throughout the Bible. The real Jews are people of color, the Israelites. But that's not all. This goes all the way up to the stars of the heavens and the Creator. Could this not mean that even God is black? Let's not forget, too, that when Jesus fled persecution, he hid in Egypt among black-skinned Africans. What this means when testing the white Jesus myth is looking plainly at the available evidence that Jesus, most certainly, did not look of Northern European descent. Moving on, his cultural heritage also portrays him as a black man. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Palestine, in the Roman province of Judea, a strategic crossroads in the Middle East, connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa around 4 BC. The region's inhabitants were predominantly African, Semitic, and Middle Eastern, with roots tracing back to ancient Cushites from Ethiopia, Canaanites from the Levant, Philistines from the Eastern Mediterranean, and Aramaic-speaking peoples from Mesopotamia. These groups intermingled, shaping the architectural, artistic, and linguistic heritage of the region. This cultural melting pot was characterized by diverse influences from Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, forging a unique identity that reflected the complex history and geography of the area. The term Middle East wasn't coined until the 1850s after the creation of the Suez Canal by the British, long after the lifetime of Jesus. Naturally, the appearance and characteristics of the people from Palestine at the time reflected the region of the world in which they lived. Beyond the geographical reality of the Holy Land in the time of Jesus, there is also an abundance of evidence in the Bible itself, reflecting the fact that Jesus did not have classic European features, as modern-day depictions like to indicate, but was in fact a dark-skinned man with hair like wool. Jesus, being a Jew, likely inherited common Semitic traits from his parents, as inscripted in Hebrews 7:14, which reads, "For it is obvious that our Lord sprang from the tribe of Judah." And, as for the word about the tribe of Judah, this brings us something more from Hollywood, which also brings us further closer to the clarity that Hollywood has always known that Jesus was black.
To win over the devil and his easy. From the lions, you get that black nigger out here. By the lost tribes of Israel, nigger! Back over! The lost tribes of Israel were black. The lost tribes of Israel were black.
It's only by the grace of God that any of these people will reach their as yet unknown destinations alive. Or maybe it's his will that they don't. So, Lieutenant, why are you venturing into those forsaken regions?
What do you know about a man named Shaka?
Does that answer your question, Lieutenant? The Masani tribe, Umulos, Lubis, Munus, Yunguanis, countless others, the banished of Southeast Africa, fleeing Shaka's spears, going straight into the arms of the white slave traders and the British troops on the borders of the Cape Colony. In a way, Lieutenant, they are the ultimate victims of recent history. If you'll favor my comparison, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka into the Babylonian captivity of slavery.
Going forward, it is unlikely that the features of Jesus were especially distinctive, since on one occasion he was able to travel in secret from Galilee to Jerusalem without being recognized. This was written in John chapter 7, verses 10 and 11, and it read this: "But afterward, when his brothers had gone up to the feast, he went up also, not publicly, but by himself quietly, and as if he did not wish to be observed. Therefore the Jews kept looking for him at the feast, and asking, 'Where can he be? Where is that fellow?'" Another instance was when Judas Iscariot had to identify Jesus to the armed crowd that arrested him in Matthew 26, verses 47 to 49. Despite all this evidence, Hollywood still continues to produce the majority of its movies, casting Jesus as a white man, decade after decade. At the same time, Hollywood stands accused of readily profiting from films portraying black people negatively. All of this, of course, is by design, and is simply another example of a system operating as intended. The big question here is, why would Hollywood intentionally decide to whitewash black individuals? The truth is, in Hollywood, whitewashing, also known as race bending, is one of its many long-standing traditions. Historically, this practice was used to discriminate against actors, both male and female, of color. The most common examples of this in the past were on occasions when white actors dressed up in what is known as blackface, redface, and yellowface. While maybe not as controversial or blatant today, the practice of whitewashing still continues in Hollywood. Roles from scripts that clearly call for a person of color are given to white actors. Most recently, we saw this in Disney's The Lone Ranger, where Johnny Depp was cast to play the role of Tonto, the Lone Ranger's Native American sidekick. This relegates people of color to playing roles that support a white lead, or roles that are usually based in stereotypes. Not only is this practice offensive and hurtful to the careers of actors of color, but the imagery and message it sends out, and the false reality it creates, can be very damaging to the psyche of people of color. When retelling a biblical story, the effects of whitewashing are amplified. In the case of the movies Noah and Exodus, whitewashing continues a well-established practice of white sacralization through religious indoctrination. Throughout the history of European imperialism and colonialism, this type of indoctrination was present. Depictions of white-only biblical figures, including prophets, angels, Jesus, and so many others, were intentionally used to subconsciously indoctrinate the false belief of white divinity and therefore superiority upon the minds of the oppressed and conquered who happen to be people of color. By allowing Hollywood to hijack biblical stories and display them however they please, we as Christians have also allowed them to be cheapened. We often miss out on cultural aesthetics, language, motifs, and overall richness when stories are told through the lens of European ideals and thought patterns. The cultural wisdom absent from these films is essential to the contextual understanding of the stories in which they represent. The film industry is one of America's largest exports. It is the biggest purveyor of persuasive imagery. It is the dominant strategy for communicating culture, even more so than books and television. If culture and history are not done right at the box office, they are rarely done right anywhere else, at least not where people are paying that much attention. According to Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, Associate Professor of Education at Teachers College, Columbia University,
Hollywood operates under the assumption that white films are for everybody, while films featuring actors of color are for niche audiences. This belief causes those particular films featuring actors of color to be marginalized and ignored by broader colored audiences.
When we entrust our religious narratives to Hollywood, the deep messages they contain are paired with pictures. And when those pictures never represent people of color, the message that is then conveyed is that people of color exists outside of God's spiritual imagination, that God is not available to them, that they are not seen as loved or cherished by the Creator. Western countries like Britain and the US, with strong Christian roots, often fail to see Jesus' true face in the refugees knocking on their doors. Instead, they cling to an image of Jesus that looks more like themselves, rather than the Middle Eastern man he truly was. Britain, which was barely able to accept that the oldest known remains in the country belonged to a black man, embraces white Jesus in the same way it denies or apologizes for Winston Churchill's racism. Recall that during colonization, Europeans took their white Jesus with them and used it to preach a doctrine of white supremacy. And with this, the notion of white superiority relied on God being represented as white. But lately, countries like Ethiopia and Russia, on discovering the truth, now use the images of a dark-skinned man to represent the Christ. Prior to the European Renaissance, it was more commonly accepted that Jesus had features in line with how the people in the region looked at the time. What this meant, however, was that during colonization, Europeans took their white Jesus with them and used it to preach a doctrine of white supremacy. The notion or game of white superiority relied greatly on God being represented as white. White deity was used a great deal to sell the myth of white superiority. Similarly, black inferiority cannot stand up if God is black. This thinking has persisted in Western society at least, which today remains reluctant to present Jesus as black or as a person of color, opting instead to depict him as one of their own. While people might debate the best way to characterize Jesus, what's certain is, it is highly unlikely that he looked like the white and Eurocentric depictions. White supremacy and racism depends on a number of falsehoods being maintained, and acknowledging Jesus as black means exposing and turning a system and an entire way of thinking about that system on its head. As Christianity spread globally, local cultures adopted Jesus' image to fit their own, often adopting Western representations. This cultural assimilation further erased Jesus' African and Middle Eastern roots. Correcting this historical distortion requires acknowledging the complex history of Jesus' portrayal and representing his authentic cultural heritage. By promoting diversity and inclusivity in media and challenging systemic racism and cultural supremacy, we can restore Jesus' true image and honor his cultural legacy. This shift towards authenticity will promote a more inclusive understanding of faith and humanity, recognizing the rich diversity of the biblical narrative and the cultures that shaped it. With recent productions starting to challenge this trend, it offers a more authentic representation of Jesus. The Color of the Cross, focusing on the last 48 hours of Christ's life as told in the Gospels, Jean-Claude Lamar, an American of Haitian descent, portrays Jesus with a depth of cultural accuracy. Lamar's physical features reclaims Jesus' true identity, which has been lost and displaced in the media amongst us for far too long. On the day of the launching in 2006, Stevenson Humphreys Brooks, an associate professor of religious studies at New York's Hamilton College and author of Cinematic Savior, Hollywood's Making of the American Christ, had this to say:
"It's very important because the film is going to provide an image of Jesus for African Americans that is no longer under the control of whites."
Jean-Claude Lamar, who played the role of Jesus, wrote, directed, and financed the film, had announced that the film would open in 30 theaters in predominantly black neighborhoods.
Black people in this country are the only race of people who worship a God outside their own image.
Lamar says,
"Showing Christ as a black man is the most poignant way to deal with the issue of race in this country because it goes to the heart of how we look at the world."
Longtime leader of LA's First African Methodist Episcopal Church and a producer of the film, Reverend Cecil Murray, also had this to say.
It also provides a positive image of blacks, something that's been scant in the United States. It could be revolutionary because for 4 centuries in our nation, blacks have been at the lowest end of the stratum. I think it will traumatize the United States more than it will foreign nations who, to some extent, don't have a centuries-old concept of equating black with negativity.
The Color of the Cross, being the first representation in the history of American cinema of Jesus as a black man, set the revolutionary trend in motion, and several other productions followed. The Book of Clarence, launched January 12th, this year 2024, is yet another example of a film that portrayed Jesus as black. The role of the Christ in this movie was played by the British actor Nicholas Pinnock, whose physical features and piercing eyes moved the media further away from the traditional white portrayal. These productions mark a significant shift towards authenticity, honoring Jesus' cultural roots and challenging the long-standing whitewashing in Hollywood. By casting actors with Middle Eastern and Latino heritage, these shows break down barriers and promote inclusivity in media representation. This renewed attention to historical accuracy and cultural sensitivity revitalizes the biblical narrative, offering a fresh perspective on Jesus' history. The authentic portrayal of the physical features and cultural background of Jesus resonates deeply with audiences, fostering a more nuanced understanding of his life and teachings. In closing, Hollywood has long always known that Jesus was black. Hollywood knows who the real Jews of the Bible are. It is our job to put the pieces of the puzzle together and do our earnest research and realize that we are the people of the Bible. We must come out of the lies and come back to the Most High God and our true heritage. That brings us to the end of yet another interesting video segment. Did you find this interest-driven and informative? Then reach out to us in the comment section and share your thoughts with us. Don't forget also to support our efforts by hitting the thumb button. Share with your friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative, and kindly subscribe to stay tuned in always, whilst you also help in building the rising membership of this channel. We are glad to have you. Thank you for watching, and see you hopefully in the next one.